Computer. Hi, I'm Elaine Brewster, and welcome to Aspects of Energy, where every week we talk about different ways to raise our energy. This last Tuesday night, I got to go to a yoga session, and it was very fun. She was nice to us older people. It was very gentle. And today we have Krislyn Elliott, who also teaches yoga. And this is very exciting to have her on. She is, she's part of or is Mardava Yoga. She has a yoga retreat every year. Well, we didn't have one last year because of COVID, but that will happen again with the best food that you can imagine, and meditation times and good talking together times. And Krislyn has actually lived in India, and where she wanted to immerse herself more in this. So I'm just going to open this up to you, Krislyn, and let you tell us, please, anything you would like to about the graceful, beautiful, vital art form that is yoga.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you one question first, and I hope one of you will ask me and be honest. Or I'm going to ask you a question. I hope you'll be honest in your answer. I want to know what you women think yoga is. When you think of it, what do you think of? You want to offend me? You can say whatever you want.
You'll have to unmute maybe.
Basically, it's sometimes a complete lifestyle and sometimes a part of a lifestyle in which it relaxes into the fluidity with health and the human body.
I love that. I love that. I would say for most people who don't know much about yoga, the answer would be 1, something I can't do. And 2, something only skinny white girls who can bend into pretzels can do, right? I mean, if you ever look up yoga on the internet, that's what you see, right? And so most people, so I'm 45, and most people at least my age and older are afraid of yoga because we can't touch our toes, or we have a hard time getting up and down from the floor, and we're not about to go take a class somewhere where we are a little bit nervous about what might happen there, right? I've been there, done that, and that partly led to where I am now. But my favorite thing about yoga is what it actually means, and it goes more back to what, I'm sorry, I don't know everybody's names. Was it Hetty? What Hetty said? It can be a full lifestyle. It can be a part of your lifestyle, but yoga, the word, is Sanskrit, which is in ancient Hindu language, means to yoke, or to yoke yourself with the divine, which changes what yoga means, right? If you think yoga is all about basically really bendy aerobics, that doesn't really make sense, right? But one of the reasons I went to India was because I wanted the old version of yoga, and they will tell you, modern yogis will tell you that yoga is not a religion. It's not, like, I don't practice it as my religion, but it was anciently and is still by some people practiced as a path. And I wanted to tell you about the path that leads to being one with God. So in yoga, there are 8 limbs. So imagine a tree, and there are 8 tree limbs, and then a trunk. And each limb is a part of the practice of yoga. that leads you to eventual enlightenment. That's the goal of people who practice yoga in this way. And in the West, we only practice really one of the limbs, which is the pose. That's only one thing, which is really kind of interesting. When I started really getting into yoga, I found it fascinating that we don't look at the rest of it in the West. The first two limbs are comprised of a code of conduct. So one is how you treat other people, and one is how you treat yourself, which is really interesting. And the code of conduct of how you treat other people is very, very similar to the Ten Commandments. And the code of conduct, the second one, that the way you treat yourself, I don't know whether you're LDS or not, you've probably heard of the word of wisdom. It's very similar. And the tenets of living the yogic lifestyle are very, very close to what a lot of Christians believe, you know, clean living, chastity, things like that. Those things we don't hear about as part of yoga so much. But the idea is it's self-discipline. Just like most religion, it helps us to become more self-disciplined, because that discipline leads to revelation or inspiration or whatever. You know, you're becoming more in tune with what your creator has for you. So we've got the first two limbs, the code of conduct. Then we have the poses, which are called asana. That's just the Sanskrit word for the yoga poses. And then the next five are all breathing and meditation techniques. And we do a little bit of breathing in the West. We do a little bit of meditation. But when you get up into the upper limbs of yoga, I've never gone there, by the way. You need a very, very good teacher. The breathing techniques are not for any kind of beginner. You can literally kill yourself with some of these breathing techniques. We don't have the ability to do them. You have to study and be taught a lot. And so you see why in the West we just don't really pay attention to the other stuff. Well, first of all, it's very unpopular to tell anybody to live a code of conduct these days, right? Especially if you teach them that they ought to be chaste and they ought to, you know, love their neighbors and things like that. I mean, some of us are taught that, but you know, generally speaking, in the world, not so popular. That's the thing that I actually love about yoga, is that they just teach a different path to get to God. It looks different than what I think my path is to get to God in some ways, but it's another path, and their path is by stilling the body, you still the mind. And when our minds are still, we can hear inspiration. That sounds like something we've all heard before, right? And that maybe you never associated that with yoga. And I personally don't think if I practice yoga and I try these breathing techniques to still my mind, that's the way that I'm gonna end up in heaven. but I love the ideas and what has happened as I've practiced yoga, and what it's done for my body, which I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, is really important to the way I think I might eventually, you know, end up in heaven. So Elaine knows this, but 9 years ago I had breast cancer, and I was very, very angry with my body. Most of us, that happens, right? If you get sick, especially if you were really healthy. I had little kids. I didn't really know I was sick. I was so mad. That's typical, right? So I worked with a naturopath, and he told me that I needed to get moving. I'm much more of an intellectual person. I don't really like to exercise. I would say up to that point, and I was 37 then, I took my body for granted. Put it that way. And at that point, I had to, one, stop being mad at my body, because I don't think we heal when we are angry or even hating our bodies and ourselves. But in order to actually heal, I had to reconcile my mind with my body. My sister's been doing yoga for almost 20 years, and she's my little sister, and I was always like, oh, it's down. That's only for bendy little skinny girls. I'm not that person, you know, like we all might think, right? And she's like, no, that's not what it's about, blah, 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 blah. So finally, I started doing a little bit of yoga. I actually found a book by a woman who is an expert in which she calls lymphatic yoga. So she's made this program, this yoga program for your lymphatic system, which is what I was having trouble with. And so it was a perfect melding of teaching me something that was really practical for me, because I needed help with my lymphatic system and moving my body. And I loved that so much that it led me into my further study of yoga, and eventually led me to want to share what I knew. I've been teaching now for about 5 years. I went to India 4 years ago, and Elaine, do we have till like 2:20? Is that?
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. I began to mention this a little earlier, but we practice a really watered down version of yoga in the West. And as I began to look at teacher trainings, I was actually pretty unhappy with what I saw happening around me, because it seemed like unless you go to a place that teaches senior yoga, what you're probably going to get is something very close to what's called power yoga, which is really not good for most of us. It's really hard on our bodies. And we don't know what we're doing. And the teacher teaches it so fast, and we try to keep up because of our egos, that we injure ourselves. And so there's not a lot of choice for something that actually helps you meld that mind, body, spirit thing together. I think I love the power fast yoga, but I also injured myself because of my ego, because of my beginning practice. I didn't know better. So when I was choosing my teacher training, I never would have gone to India. You guys, I've never been anywhere. Up until that point, I didn't even have a passport. Never been anywhere in the world. And I go to India. I still can't believe I did that. But I talked my best friend into going with me, and we took off, and we were there for 5 weeks. It was an immersive program. We lived in the yoga center. They fed us. We studied philosophy and anatomy and different teaching methods, and actually performed 6 hours of yoga a day. It was pretty intense. I came home really fit. But my favorite thing, I think, about that experience that I think I was really blessed to get is we had our philosophy teacher. He taught philosophy and the asana, the poses. But we had this Indian teacher who was also a seeker. And so when he would teach us principles of yoga, he would say, and Moses said this, and Jesus said this, and Muhammad said this, and the Buddha said this. And that was amazing to me to hear that he believed also that there are many, many places that we can find wisdom. And that appealed to all of my little, my intellectual brain, just listening to him. But if there's anything that I want to leave you about yoga today, is one thing that he taught us one day. So the very first principle of yoga, so remember we have those 8 limbs, and the first 2 are code of conduct. The very first one is called Ahimsa. And that means do no harm. And so many people think of yogis not only as skinny blonde girls that roll up into pretzels, but also you have to be vegan. And so someone in our class asked our teacher about, do you have to be vegetarian or vegan to be a yogi? And our teacher just, it was one of those moments, you know, that you have with a teacher sometimes where he just really stopped for a minute and he looked at all of us and he said, being a vegetarian is very easy, but it is very difficult to love your neighbor. And it's very difficult to love yourself. And that was his interpretation of Ahimsa, of doing no harm, of taking it farther than a mere very outward profession of your feelings about something. You know, it is very easy to be vegetarian. It's very, very easy to choose not to eat meat. Very, very hard, especially this last year where the world is in turmoil. Very hard some days to love our neighbors. And that's what I try to bring to my yoga practice, is the remembrance of that, of the kindness, being kind to my body, because I don't stretch and move like I did even 4 years ago when I went and did that training. I don't stretch like I did when I was 20. I might stretch better tomorrow than I do today, but I don't harm myself by criticizing myself for having different needs and different abilities day to day. And that is one of the things that I try really, really hard as a teacher to teach my students. My sister and I teach together, and both of us are super committed to helping everyone who comes to our classes their own practice. That's what I think true yoga means. It's not about achieving a certain pose, and it's not about achieving, you know, the ability to do some really crazy breath exercise and go into this like otherworldly mental state. It's about how we live our lives, which, you know, if you're Christians, it's exactly the same. It's just some more tools in our box. It's some more explanations on how to do it. You know, we could say the same thing. It's very, very easy not to be a murderer, right? We don't really have that problem, right? That's a commandment, super easy to keep. But love our neighbor, super hard. And it does start with being okay in our own skins. And that is, I would guess, you know, it's the aspect of energy for me that why Elaine asked me to do this, is because it's every day I struggle with that idea of Ahimsa, of doing no harm. How do I share my life in a way, share my teaching, share what I know, share my yoga class with people without harming them? Do I tell my 80-year-old client that she's doing it wrong? I would if she was going to hurt herself. But otherwise, she's finding her own practice in her own body and rejoicing in what she can do. And I never have thought that I would teach yoga. If you'd have told me 10 years ago, I would have thought, I would just have laughed. But it's become such a gift, because I do feel like I'm okay at it, and I hope I'm helping people raise their energy by helping them feel grateful that they still have whatever mobility they have. I mean, we teach people in chairs wheelchairs who can't get up and down. We teach that, taught people who are having some kind of issue, like my cousin whose arm is just had shoulder surgery. She can still do some things. It's about celebrating what we have and just rejoicing in that. And I don't know if I have anything else to say, except that I loved India and it was a colorful, joyful place. And I especially loved the energy of that Indian seeker who taught us such a key thing. I will never forget that, and forget that I think his biggest lesson to me was to love my neighbor. And that's how this works for me. So.
This is absolutely wonderful, Krislyn.
Thank you.
I have several questions, but I think that for starters, one of the questions that everyone on this wants to know the end of the story of the breast cancer.
Oh, yeah, I'm good. So I worked with a naturopath. I didn't go through traditional, they're not traditional, but I didn't do surgery and chemo and radiation. And I came out of that experience healthier than I had been in years. And like I said, it's 9 years ago, and I take really good care of my health and am always making sure I don't fall back into maybe some of the patterns that may have made me sick. There's no way to know, but yeah, I think that practicing and getting that mind, body, soul connection back for me was super key. I have the tendency to, when things get really, really hard, to literally almost like step out of my body, because like my spirit is I know that sounds kind of hokey, but I don't want to deal with it. So I'm just going to just kind of observe instead of actually being present in the moment. And my yoga practice and having that experience of cancer has helped me be, how to explain it, just more accepting of where I am. And I go do my testing every year, and every year it looks like I'm just healthier than the last. So pretty exciting.
Do any of you have questions that you want to ask Krislyn? You can unmute. I think we're all stunned. So you mentioned something, and I'd love to hear you a little bit more. Talk about body mind.
Well, of course, it's individual, because I think some of us are much more in our bodies than some others of us. Like, I don't know if I can explain it quickly and really well, but like my mom has always, for instance, been very body oriented. She loves to move. She's always had a super good she's just always been very accepting of her body. She's not like, I don't know how, my sister and I talk about this all the time, because for some reason we're the ones who are always like, oh my gosh, I've gained like 10 pounds, like, why, or look at this Grand Canyon in between our foreheads. And our mom is just like, woo, like life is awesome, and she's just super active, but she's not she's a very intelligent woman, but she's not intellectual, where my sister's kind of in the middle there, and then I'm the super intellectual. Like I kid you not, I literally didn't really think my body mattered much. I mean, we've been taught all our lives, right, that our bodies are a temple, right, but eventually we'll be like in heaven with a perfect body. And our Puritan upbringing teaches us that this body is basically like a giant hair shirt, right? We have to go through all this sorrow, all this sadness in our bodies, right? Which is true, but to some of us, I think it's a little more difficult to accept, if that makes sense, and or even just not necessarily accept, but even kind of believe that our bodies are super special. And it wasn't, I remember in sometime during my cancer treatment when I was reading the scriptures, and it said, I can't remember where, I don't remember if it's the Book of Mormon or the Bible, but it says that in our bodies we will see God. And at that moment, that was like, I never really wanted to admit that my body was that important. I don't know why, you guys. Maybe if you're, my mom is, you're like, I'm making no sense to you. But if you're like me and you've lived more in your mind than in your body, it makes sense. But at that moment, I felt like I had been ignoring the gift of being a human being instead of just a brain and all the things. And why did I ignore that at that time? I had 4 beautiful children. I had, you know, like good things that happened to me, but I hadn't really experienced them as a product of my body. Is that like I was experiencing my life through my mind and not through my body. And so I think through cancer and having to deal with, you know, those feelings of your body has betrayed you, because that's what everyone thinks when they get sick, whether it's true or not. And then working through learning how to use my body in a way that felt good to me, felt natural to me, felt more like a blessing to me than a curse, you know, because we often think our bodies are just like, they just give us a lot of pain, which they do, but it's a mind shift, I think, and not one that I still make every day, but I'm learning.
So you've been learning to, instead of just being so concept driven, to be driven also by the physicality. And
Right.
you're putting both of those together.
Yeah.
This is just fabulous, Krislyn. I don't know about all the rest of you on this, but I have learned tons. Yeah, because yoga to me, you know, one of the reasons I like it is because I feel like it's like massaging my organs. It's doing some really good things internally, which I can't see, but I trust it's doing it. It's also really slow, and I don't do anything slow. And so it's kind of hard for me. And so I think on all of our levels, you've really shown us a whole lot about what it's done for you and what it can do for us and what it is. You've just opened our eyes, I believe. Thank you, Krislyn.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of friends in the company Nikken, Barbara Bertucci and Linda Morris and Heather Ayama particularly. And they always remind me to be careful of my words and to treat myself kindly, which is, you know, your second path. And like your seeker teacher said, treating other people and treating yourself, that's hard.
Yeah, it is. It's so hard, especially when you're mad at everybody and yourself, right? I mean, the world hasn't been going the way that anybody's wanted it to go over the last year. And I've been angrier than I can ever remember being sometimes. And learning to tone that down. I'm angry at myself because I'm angry at someone else, you know, all that stuff, you know, that, okay, take it down a notch. Let's do some breathing, which I love to teach. Just kind of get back into my own little space here and breathe and teach myself that God's in charge. Love my neighbor. It's going to be okay. And then I just keep teaching and keep trying to live what I've learned through the gospel and through yoga and any number of other things, because I love to learn all sorts of things. Like I do lots of the things that I know Elaine talks about on and has talked about on these podcasts. There's so many ways to encourage our bodies and our minds to be healthy. So many kind ways that we can encourage our health. And I think I said, Elaine said she does everything fast. I do everything slow, literally everything slow. And my sister and I are the slowest yoga teachers ever. And some people don't like that, but we say, if you want aerobics, go to aerobics. We do this slow so that people feel happy physically and mentally by the end of the practice. So come practice with me sometime. I'd love to have any of you. It would be wonderful.
That's right. And I have extra rooms here at my house. You can come and stay with me.
All right. It'll be perfect. It'll be perfect. But right now, I teach for free on Zoom. So Elaine can give you that information sometime if any of you want to join in sometime.
That's true. Thank you. Yeah, good idea. All right. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay. Thank you so much, Krislyn, Elliott. This has just been so instructive. And we are all going to, number one, try and be more gentle with ourselves, just like Krislyn is. She's a very, very gracious person. And well, we all keep doing, don't we? Next week, building on this idea of mind body, we've got Deepak Chari. Do not get it mixed up. It's not Deepak Chopra. It's Deepak Chari, but he uses a biofeedback system where he works with the literal energy systems in your body. He works with frequencies and harmonics in order to change things in your body, get rid of old paradigms, many times things that have come down to us through our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. And so then that's how our body reacts and how our body thinks it's supposed to do. And to our amazement, we look at someone else and find that they're acting in the same circumstance completely differently. And it's because of these paradigms, and it makes a huge difference. So thank you all. And we'll recommend that everyone maybe on Zooms, find some people on Zooms and give them an extra big smile, because it will raise your energy and it will raise theirs. All right.
Thank you. I loved every bit of it.
Wonderful.
Thank
you. Thanks for smiling at me. I love your faces.
Wonderful people, every one of them. Bye.